Hello, everyone. Sorry about that delay there. Had a little bit of a kerfuffle when it came to pulling up some of my visuals for this stream. Hold on, gotta set up the comments on my end, and we are here. So, I've made the announcement on X that I was going to be covering the whole Trump / Elon Musk uncovering the U.S. aid situation. And the reason I wanted to cover this, sorry about that, is because I feel like this whole situation explains a lot about why entertainment and even comics have been the way they have been for the last 4 years. Now, okay, sort of backpedal it by a lot, and I understand a lot of this happened before Trump's first presidency, though I would argue Trump probably didn't really know exactly what he was stepping his foot into in his first presidency, because he still came across as like a reality TV star when he started his first term. So I don't think he completely understood exactly what he was getting himself into. And it wasn't until after he was voted out of office after his first term and spent some time being a regular citizen where he was attacked, that's when he finally realized, okay, this is happening now. And he is back for business. He is back for business. Which, slightly terrifying, because I'm still not exactly sure if he is aware of the power that he has or aware of the effect that he can have, but he's certainly making a lot of decisions. He's actually getting his ass into gear, which, okay, in my lifetime, I have been so used to presidents making promises about things and then never exactly fulfilling them, or they will fulfill them in the most limp-wristed way in like the last 2 years of his presidency. So to have a president just come into office then automatically being guns a-blazing, getting shit done, it's like, oh my god, you are serious about that. Okay, alright, I guess I better hang on while this bucking bronco keeps going. But anyways, so we're not going to focus on the majority of Trump stuff now. We're going to focus on the U.S. aid stuff, and specifically what U.S. aid has been funding. Okay. So a lot of people are still confused on what the heck U.S. aid is supposed to be, because a lot of people are confused on what exactly U.S. aid is. And, alright, we're going to go by Wikipedia here. But USAID is an anagram for United States Agency for International Development. So their primary responsibility for administering civilian foreign aid and development assistance. So that is what USAID is supposed to be. That's what it's supposed to be. But then you get into the nitty-gritty of what exactly do you mean by development assistance and what exactly do you mean by foreign aid? And what Doge has uncovered about the USAID program is horrifying. in my opinion. You know what? Screw it. Yeah, that's right. I still answer to Twitter. Okay, so what they are supposed to, what USAID is supposed to do is like humanitarian stuff, health programs, economic development, stuff like that, education, cultural, and social programs. So that's what USAID is supposed to be. And look, I have no opposition to charity. Look, if you are within a good standing and you're willing to be charitable, then sure, go ahead and be charitable. However, what has transpired, especially within the last 6 months, with not only the hurricane that happened, and my sister was in Florida for that hurricane, and she was fine, but still devastating in its own way. But especially with like North Carolina suffering the biggest punch from that, and double whammy with the LA fires, and all of a sudden the government's like, oh, we don't have any money. We can't afford to do this. We can't really do this. It's like, really? Really? But then I still find it extremely funny that he named the agency Doge. Elon Musk is such a memester. But anyways. So, turns out there has been a lot of wasteful spending. Like, a lot of wasteful spending. Including $70,000 for a DEI musical in Ireland, which I've heard was a transgender musical in Ireland, which, what? But then you get $32,000 for a transgender comic in Peru. USAID was funding a LGBTQA LMNOP plus comic in Peru to convince the Peruvians that being LGBTQ plus and wanting to cut off your dick is fine. But it's just looking at everything that's been going on, it is fascinating. But the two big revelations that are relevant to tonight's stream is alright, so apparently according to what I've heard from some sources, Disney has been receiving USAID money. But the money was not for grants, it was payments for subscriptions to its publications. Politico, not 80 million. So it's like, it's not as horrific, but it's still not good. That Disney has been receiving essentially USAID and Politico. Okay, what is Politico? Because I'm also a little confused on what is political too. Politico. Hold on. Because I've been hearing about Politico for a little bit. Because I know Disney and Politico have been in cahoots, and Politico has been... Disney / Politico has been receiving a lot of aid from the USDA, so... And apparently Politico has been helping Disney throughout. So it seems like Politico has been helping, Disney with its battle with DeSantis, and they've been receiving a lot of USA aid to that, but that's not the only company who's been receiving USA aid. The BBC has also been getting USA aid, and it's hilarious watching the BBC try and cover their butts about this. They're trying to be like, oh, it's not that much, but also we're trying to recover from the loss. And it's pathetic hearing it from the BBC. Disney has not, from my knowledge, said anything about the USA aid, because I think they're probably still forming their statement, because it's out there now. They're getting everything out there. But when it comes to our entertainment and the comic books, and what we know now about exactly what USA aid has been funding, this explains a lot. It explains a lot, because for years now, like for a decade now, we have been wondering, wait, why are comics going in this direction? Why is everything going in this weird uber leftist direction? We don't like this. And it's like, it's not that comic book fans don't appreciate a leftist perspective. And it's not that we're all a bunch of conservatives. It's just, it was around 2015, 2016 when there was this big push for uber leftist mindset, And we had been wondering at the time, why the hell are you doing this? This is kind of stupid. And it's not just because of the leftism, it's also because they had crap writers, but that's a whole other issue. And we said that, and we were told, oh, you're just a bunch of bigots for not liking it. And we were kind of shooed away. And it just kept going for years and years and years. And all the while, we were just all silently thinking, why is this happening? What is going on? Why are we getting all of this weird-ass leftist comics? Why are we getting all this weird-ass progressive comics? and it started bleeding out into other stuff, like kids shows. And then you had the BBC with Doctor Who, with them doing the whole female doctor thing, which I don't think anybody would have been too up in arms about with a female doctor, because the Doctor does regenerate with each season. So it's not a big surprise that he becomes a different person. And it would have been interesting when the Doctor regenerated, they become a woman. So it's not that big of a thing. But at the same time, the direction they went with the female Doctor, it was not satisfactory for many fans. And we kept wondering for all of these years, why is this happening? Why? Because fans have been making their opinions very clear from the moment this stuff started. Like, don't let our cute, dorky little faces deceive you. Like, comic book fans can be extremely vicious with their criticisms, and they can be extremely opinionated about what's going on. Even the slightest little detail. I used to date a guy who was an uber comic book fan, and he would go on rants about the Captain America suit, and he would just rant and rant and rant about a certain stripe on the arm, like the armband of Captain America's suit. Like, okay, that stripe's not supposed to be there. I don't like it. I don't like this certain section of Captain America's suit. Comic book fans can be absolutely brutal and blunt about their criticisms. So it's not like they can claim, oh, we didn't know the fans didn't like this. We didn't know the people didn't like this. No, the fans have been telling you for years that we didn't like this. We've been telling you for years. And, screw off. And we've just been wondering, why do they keep doing this? Nobody likes this. The ratings are falling. The sales are falling. Nobody wants this except for the Tumblerinas. So why does this stuff keep happening? Why do they keep pushing this stuff in our face? And then Elon Musk and his team come in, they look into the USAID, and they uncover the fact that basically both Disney and the BBC have been getting money from the US government. And when you look at the other stuff that USAID has been funding, LGBT programs in Afghanistan, Syria, Nicaragua, Guatemala, blah, 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 it all makes sense now. It all makes sense why all of this is happening. Because the government wanted to push this narrative for some reason, and they've just been throwing money at any place they could to try and fund these uber leftist projects. And when you consider how leftist the BBC and Disney, and I would not be surprised if it was revealed that DC and Marvel have been... I guess you could say Marvel has been rolled into Disney, so it would be redundant to say Marvel was in on it. But I wouldn't be surprised if DC was in on it too. But it makes sense now. The whole reason why this kept going, even though the sales are dropping, the ratings are dropping, everyone has made it perfectly clear that they don't like this, they don't want this, but they still keep pushing it anyways. It makes sense now. It all makes sense now. They have been deliberately ignoring the whims of the people because they want to push this message. And my big question is, why? Why are you going through all this trouble to put not just thousands of dollars, but millions, and in some cases, billions of dollars into projects to prop up this ideology that even, let's be honest here, and I know a lot of progressives are not gonna be happy to hear this, but America is one of the most progressive nations on the planet. And the fact that even America is rejecting a lot of this junk, what the hell makes you think that this is going to slide for the rest of the world? And also, wasn't the fact that the fans were pushing back on all of this DEI progressive bullshit in comic books and Disney, wasn't that enough of a wake-up call to be like, hey, we don't like this stuff. We're not going to pay for this stuff. If you keep doing this stuff, we're just going to find cool stuff elsewhere. How do you not? 2 and 2 together. Shouldn't that be enough of a handling in the first place that, hey, if the most progressive nation on the planet does not want this junk, therefore the rest of the world is not going to want this junk. And also, we've been rejecting this for over a decade at this point. We've been rejecting this stuff for over a decade. So, why? But I guess we know why this stuff exists in the first place. It's because USAID and other organizations have just been piling money into crap like they've been piling crap into the Doctor Who with not just the female Doctor Who, but also, the gay black Doctor Who. And it makes sense now. Because they've been receiving this aid, and this aid came with an agenda, and it's like you have to stick with the agenda no matter what. So, it all makes sense now. It all makes sense why these companies kept going on with this crap, despite the fact that the people did not want this crap. It all makes sense now. Because they were getting free money from it. So why wouldn't they make it? And it also makes sense why, especially with Marvel and DC, when it came to producing this progressive narrative, they didn't bother to get top-tier writers. Because, let's be real, a lot of the writers they've been getting with the modern comics, especially the comics dealing with this progressive message, they ain't good. Like, they are not good. They are pretty Tumblrina cringe. But it makes sense, because they're just getting this free money anyway, but they, it takes money to print the comics, it takes money to pay everyone involved, so they're just getting all this free money anyway, and you gotta ration it out, so why get some top-tier writers who know what they're doing with this progressive stuff? Let's just get some random-ass weirdo from Twitter who just accused us for being racist, get them to write the comic for us. I mean, who was that writer? Don't hate me, I'm going somewhere with this. Dang it. There was this writer for Shi Chang. I forget what her name was, but there's this one. She was an Asian woman, and I think it was C.B. Cebulski. He had, when he was doing Sword of the Immortal, he was going by an Asian name for Sword of the Immortal. And this one chick on Twitter called him out saying, "Oh, that's racist that you did that." And just because she called him out for being racist for using an Asian name for his manga, because, okay, it's a bit complicated, but it's like, if you're on the editing team, you can't submit work by yourself because there's always the chance that you're going to become the editor of your own work and you're going to So it's like I don't exactly approve of him using a pen name, especially a pen name that insinuates you are Asian, but at the same time, I get it. However, that's not the point. The point is that she's calling him racist for that, and she gets a job. What? Like, that's all it takes? I mean, I've joked before when this stuff started that, hey, maybe I should just tweet out Marvel is being super racist because blah, 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 character. And I could have very easily gotten a job myself if I just bitched and moaned enough. And I guess I wouldn't have been too wrong. But it still brings the question of why would Marvel and DC make these decisions when obviously they're not qualified writers. And again, coming back to the topic, we now know. I would not be surprised if Doge uncovered more stuff and uncovered the roots of exactly how far the corruption goes. But I'm just disappointed. I'm really just disappointed at this point. I can't... Fury pops up now and then, especially because when I consider that my tax dollars went to all of this. No, Siri. Bad Siri. But I'm just disappointed. I can't even be angry. I'm just disappointed. We've been dealing with this for a decade now. And I can't even be angry. But I know that was a jumbled mess because we're still in the early stages, because this is the first stone uncovered with the political corruption, especially when it came to the media and our entertainment. I'm just trying to strike the iron while it's hot here. But this is the first stone. I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more information, especially when we get to the nitty-gritty of what's going on. So stay tuned. If you want an update on the whole Doge uncovering political corruption, especially when it comes to political corruption in our entertainment, let me know, and I absolutely will cover that for you guys, to the best of my knowledge. But let's go on to another lighter topic. Oh yeah, I've been watching Nuxanor. He is not a news channel at all. He is a drama channel, he's a chaos channel, but he is entertaining to watch every now and again. But anyways, so another topic that I have been promising, and I've been wanting to make just a flat-out video about this, but I didn't really know where to start when it came with this topic. So, let me take a sip of beer here before we get into this, because I'm gonna need a little bit more juice. Okay. So, remember when I said that about a decade ago, all of a sudden Marvel was pulling this progressive stuff on us, and they were doing this whole DEI thing, and yada, 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 yada. Okay, so this channel, which used to be called Diversity in Comics, but is now referred to as Comics Matter with ya boy Zach, this channel has been covering all of the progressive nonsense since then. He has been on top of all of the weird decisions that the comic book industry has been making. He's been giving his own opinion about all of it. So you get it. He's the comic book drama channel, if you would like to call him that. But within the last year, something's changed. Now, if you want to be what's the word? If you want to be kind about it, you could say that the death of Oh yeah, Mike, this is the guy who keeps he's one of the guy who keeps insulting everyone. You might also be thinking of Ethan Van Sciver, who just keeps getting into petty drama, but Ethan has been doing that for years and years and years, and Zach has been doing this for... He's had his hot takes here and there, but his real insulting everyone arc only started up around a year ago. And it started with the death of Ed Piskor. Long story short, Ed Piskor, you know how the story goes. He gets accused of sexual inappropriateness of some nature. News cycles roll. However, this time around, Ed Piskor commits suicide, which very sad. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that the accusations were right or not, but the fact of the matter is, this comic book creator, he committed suicide because of accusations. Nothing was taken to the police. Nothing... Oh yeah, I'm still pissed about that too, Mike. And what is her name? This British lady that Ed mentioned in his suicide note, who was one of the women who killed him. But she was like she's a very well-known cancellation cow, and I am not afraid to call her a cow because, my God, this is not the first time she's done it. But anyways, it is very sad, but he named the people who drove him to suicide, and this hit Zach hard. This hit him hard, and on a level I can understand, because he has been dealing with people trying to cancel him, trying to get him to kill himself since the early days of this whole comic book drama. So, on a level I can understand, but a lot of people credit the death of Piskor to the start of this whole thing. And the moment that it became clear to people that something was different about him and that he was switching gears is when Mad Max Furiosa came out. That is I get it. This is a very big shift, but I'm trying to be as objective as possible, and I'm trying to give you the timeline of events here. But, okay, Ed Piskor happened, shook up Zach enough, Furiosa happens. And when Mad Max Furiosa happens, it flopped. And for some reason, this flips a switch in your boy Zach where he decided, okay, we've gone too far with this culture war nonsense. I'm going to fight my fans now. To which everyone's like, what are you doing? And he's doubling down on Furiosa especially. He was very angry that Mad Max Furiosa flopped at the box office and even claimed we won the culture war, but at what cost? And my response is, okay, from what I've heard, Furiosa was a good movie. Like, even people who are contrarians have watched Furiosa and said, oh yeah, this is a good movie. However, the fact that it flopped is not the audience's fault at all. Sure, the marketing was fine, blah, 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 blah. However, keep in mind, for a decade now, people have just been... They've been ham-fisted this weird progressive nonsense for a decade, where it's like, strong female woman, strong female woman, strong female woman! And the products that came out of it were either lackluster or flat-out crap. So, when Furiosa came around, after all of that nonsense, starring a main female character, and she's a super badass, can you really blame the audiences for looking at that movie and being like, oh my god, this is going to be another girl boss movie, isn't it? I mean, yes, it is a prequel to Mad Max Fury Road, which was well received. But the fact of the matter is, we've been dealing with this stuff for so many years now. Can you really be that surprised when something like Furiosa comes out and people don't want to watch it because it stars a female character? I don't like it either. Don't get me wrong. I don't like it either. But the fact that people were so shy about watching Furiosa after all of the gaslighting that they've been through, I think this shows that it's not the audience's fault, and it's not even a culture war thing. It's just the studios have been doing this crap for so long and people caught on and they don't want to deal with this anymore. Like, it's sad Furiosa didn't get the audience that it did, but the fact that Furiosa flopped, that's not the audience's fault. That's the studio and Hollywood for just poisoning the concept of having a main female lead for an action movie. That's their fault, not our fault. And apparently, your boy Zach did not get that message, because he just started attacking people left and right about Furiosa. It is a lot of stupid drama. It's a lot of stupid drama. But anyways, so he attacked people for Furiosa. The Acolyte came out. He attacked people for that. Da 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 da. But then another switch flipped. And he's looking at this, and apparently he watched a Matt Walsh video, which you do sometimes. He got really mad at Matt Walsh, and so he makes this comment: being a conservative should literally disqualify you from being a critic. Take a hike, Ned Flanders. There is a lot in that statement. This was a couple months ago, but I'm bringing this up now because it ties into my main point. But there is a lot with this statement. Let's start with this. A hell of a lot of conservatives don't like Matt Walsh. I know this might surprise people like your boy Zach, but quite a few conservatives actually don't like Matt Walsh for various reasons. A lot of conservatives look at Matt Walsh and immediately peg him as being a grifter. Because he just seems very disingenuous in some of his points, especially when it comes to video games. But the second point is his statement of being a conservative should disqualify you from being a critic. Which is a very weird statement to make, because your boy Zach himself, he's not a liberal. If you want to classify him, he would probably be like the 90s neoliberal, but he's also kind of centrist and also leans a little bit more to the right. So it's very strange for him to make that statement that being conservative should disqualify you from being a critic. Why would being a conservative disqualify you from being a critic? In my humble opinion, if you have an opinion about a thing, you should be able to express it. And if you want to critique a thing, regardless of your political affiliation, you should be able to do so. And hey, sometimes you get known for being a critic. And that happens on both the left and the right. There are leftist critics and there are rightist critics. And both do have their own good points when it comes to media and whatnot. So I am personally of the opinion, I don't care what political your affiliation is. That in itself should not disqualify you from being a critic. My brain still breaks every time I see this statement. I'm sorry. So, and Zach himself, he does lean slightly to the right, or conservative, and that's why I don't get why he made this statement. But it gets worse. Because later on, he decides to go after the Rippaverse. Now look, you can have some legitimate criticisms towards the Rippaverse. The Rippaverse is flawed. I mean, it's made by human beings, and humans are flawed anyways, but the Rippaverse has its flaws. But the Rippaverse decided they're going to make a couple of kid comics, which is fine. And for some reason, Zach has decided to make a little fit about the fact that Rippaverse is making kitty comics, and he concludes that it's because conservatives want to make kitty comics. Let's read this statement here. What is this, and why is there a ticking clock in the email? If I don't buy this, are we going to be subjected to more terrible comics from Republican e-celebs or less? I'm sure the writer is a nice guy, but might I suggest the military or banking instead of making the worst comics that have ever existed to own the chuds? And don't give me the I'm buying this for my niece bit. Your niece doesn't want this. No kid wants this. You were a kid once. Do you remember liking stuff like this? Because I remember hating it. Comics is the only industry where nobody says, stop, that's terrible, don't do that. You're jealous, Zach. Bullshit. I've paid for 4 Rippaverse books and have given positive reviews of 3 of them. This is crap. What the hell is this? Seriously, what the hell is this? Again, there is so much weird with this. He's basically suggesting that conservatives shouldn't make comic books at all, or conservatives shouldn't make art at all. And in a later statement, he did even go further and say religious comics are not something that people would want to buy. Now, I take personal offense to this as someone who's a big fan of the Soul Finder series from Iconic Comics. And funnily enough, your boy Zach has gone oddly quiet about Iconic Comics. And again, you can have your criticism about Iconic Comics too. You could have your criticism about whatever comic book company. But it's so odd. Okay, Zach, you do know that comic books were originally made for children, right? Comic books were not originally made for middle-aged men. That wasn't their original target audience. And secondly, what the hell is wrong with making comic books for kids? And on another note, why is it wrong for a conservative to make comic books for kids or adults? What's wrong with any of that? Dude, what is your problem? Why do you have such a bug up your ass about conservatives making art? And that whole, oh, I'm sure he's a nice guy. I might have suggested the military or banking. Like, go away. Don't make art. Go into, like, real jobs. So, by that logic that conservatives should not bother making art, they should instead go and get real jobs. Are you suggesting that all conservative creators should just stop making art and just go get real jobs? You do know that means you're basically saying that Mike Baron and Chuck Dixon should just stop whatever the hell they're doing and go out and get real jobs. Like, they should stop creating whatsoever. Like, you understand that's what you're saying, right? That's what you're saying. And I don't agree with that. Okay, look, I don't agree with everything that Mike Baron or Chuck Dixon posts on social media. I do follow them both. But I don't think that they should stop doing what they're doing. Because even if I don't agree with everything that they do, I do still enjoy some of the stuff they make. And I can appreciate what they make, even when they're conservative. I appreciate liberal stuff too, but I appreciate stuff from anyone of any political leaning, you know? So, to just, for some reason, wage this war against conservatives is bizarre. And his latest statement about this particular comic that Rippaverse is coming out with, being like, oh, goo goo gaga, conservatives are making baby comics, goo goo gaga. And what are you doing? Dude, what are you doing? Stop! Like, seriously, stop at this point. This is embarrassing. Dude, you're in your 50s. And this is a comic book made for children. Sure, it's not made for you, but just because it's not made for you doesn't mean it shouldn't be made. And it doesn't mean that the people who made this comic are stupid. And that's what ultimately got me to finally unfollow from your boy Zach. He has been on this weird vendetta against other people for frivolous reasons, to be honest. Like, would he be making this tirade if it was someone who is more politically aligned to him? But here's the thing, and I want to make this very clear before I close out. I don't hate ya boy Zach. I appreciate quite a few of his projects. I loved Jawbreaker's Lost Souls, for example. I still have that book on my shelf. I'm still waiting on the rest of the Jawbreakers books that I ordered because I want to make a whole complete Jawbreakers review. And I adored Rock and Roll Ninja. That has been my favorite indie comic from 2024. So I do like the stuff he produces. He does make some very fun stuff. But I really think he needs to reel it in. He needs to... He needs someone to take away his phone for a couple of weeks and scoot him out into the mountains to camp for a little while. He can do some stargazing, he could do some fishing, he could chop wood, he can wrestle a bear or whatever he's going to do out in the woods. But someone needs to get him away from the internet for a little while. I think that's desperately what he needs. And I'm sad that I had to unsubscribe from him because I did like his videos for a very long time, and I tried to hold on for the majority of his whole I'm going to attack my fans arc, but just can't anymore. It's just so disappointing. And I don't even really know where else to go from this topic. I'm just sad. Anyway, I know I've been a bit of a rambling this stream. Sorry about that, but I don't know. Mike, are you still there? Because I'm going to start looking up some funny stuff. Oh, crap. I'm in my alt account here. Let's fix that. Oop.
Big balls and small balls.
Yeah, he has this habit of introducing things like that. Well, this video looks interesting from the library ladder. How about we watch a little bit of that? Skip.
Moorcock and Freud walk into a bar. Sounds like the start of a bad joke full of unfortunate double entendres. And in a way, that's part of the story of how Elric of Melniboné, the most famous of Michael Moorcock's Eternal Champions and one of the most iconic characters in the history of the fantasy genre, came to be. In this, the fifth installment in my exploration of the Eternal Champion saga, I'll cover Elric's sly repudiation of the fantasy genre's typical tropes.
Yeah, if people bum you out, you should definitely. Yeah, that's exactly how I feel, Mike. It's just, the whole situation bums me out. And at this point, it's like, you know what? I'm going to unfollow you for a little while. If I hear that you're going to stop being a dickhead, then I'll resubscribe from you. But for now, I'm just going to stop. But anyway, let's hear about how Elric of Melniboné relates to Freud.
And conventions, his Freudian undertones, as well as the origins, themes, and impact of his epic adventures. I'll also provide a suggested reading order for them. If you're new to my channel, my earlier Eternal Champion videos include an introduction to the overall saga, as well as discussions of the Arakosi, John Dacre, Von Beck, Dorian Hawkmoon, and Oswald Bastable stories. Links to those videos are provided in the video description. Michael Moorcock began crafting the character that would eventually become Elric when he was only a teenager in the 1950s. While editing an Edgar Rice Burroughs fanzine at the time, Moorcock developed a friendship with illustrator James Cawthorne, and they exchanged ideas and brainstormed plot elements for a few years.
I am super jealous of that, though. Being a teenager and just editing a magazine at that point, I am super jealous of that, because when I was a teenager, I had DeviantArt, which is not a high accomplishment at all.
About an albino character, modeled partly on the arch-villain Monsieur Zenith from the long-running Sexton Blake Pulp Fiction detective series, and partly on Robert E. Howard's Conan the Barbarian, among other influences.
Yeah.
When Science Fantasy magazine approached him in 1959 to write a series of Conan-inspired sword and sorcery stories for it, Moorcock was eager for the opportunity, but he had second thoughts about the Conan angle, which he considered too juvenile for his evolving taste.
Oh, screw that. Like, Conan is simplistic. I will be the first one to say Conan is simplistic when it came to fiction, but there is a lot you can draw from Conan, especially when you grow up and you realize that Conan, he comes from a different culture. So to judge Conan by modern sensibilities, he seems juvenile until you realize dude was literally born in a barbaric society, and he just decided, you know what, screw this, I'm gonna just do my own thing. He goes on all these different adventures, and he encounters people of different philosophies and different ideologies, and he learns from them how to work in society. I'm learning that as I'm reading the original Conan stories. Even when he's King Conan, he still has that barbarism in him, but he learns gradually that, okay, if I am going to exist in this world and this thing called civilization is going to exist around me, I need to learn how to work with civilization.
Despite his relative youth, Moorcock had already read widely across the existing fantasy genre and its precursors, and was enamored with the Gothic romanticism of Lord Byron, Matthew Lewis, and Mervyn Peake, with the symbolism of chivalric epics such as The Song of Roland and Ivanhoe, with the unconventional heroes of Jurgen and Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, with the dreamlike prose of The Sword of Welleran, with the philosophical, metaphysical, and allegorical questions of The Well of the Unicorn, The Ship of Ishtar, and The Pilgrim's Progress, and with the moral framework and immortal conflicts of Poul Anderson. In his view, Howard's uncomplicated Conan lacked many of those complicating qualities. Moreover,
I mean, Conan had plenty of complicated quests, but I'm not saying the other books didn't. I'm just saying it wasn't that simple.
Moorcock was fascinated by the moral ambiguity of French existentialism, and he was at the forefront of the New Wave movement in science fiction that prioritized exploration of inner space, the mind in all its complexity, over that of outer space. To that end, he studied the psychological theories of Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, and others, and incorporated them into his stories. Elric was the product of all those diverse influences, plus one other, the author himself. Moorcock has said Elric is the character of his with whom he most identifies. He imbued Elric with many of the doubts, uncertainties, questions, internal conflicts, and rebellious tendencies his own youthful self felt about human nature, about power, about morality, about the future, and about the bonds that tie us together and tie us down. He wrote in a 1964 essay that Elric was me, and the mingled qualities
I hope not all of you, because you would be dead by now.
of betrayer and betrayed, the bewilderment about life in general, the search for some solution to it all, the expression of this bewilderment in terms of violence, cynicism, and the need for revenge, were all characteristics of mine. So I was identifying very closely with my hero-villain. Moorcock was an angry young man targeting an audience much like himself.
I'm trying to think if any of my... I mean, as a writer, inevitably parts of yourself are going to come out through your main character. Like, that's just how it is. But I'm trying to think. I mean, I kind of do that with some of my main characters. Like with Skylar, she definitely has my penchant for not thinking 2 steps ahead. And a couple of my other characters, there's that whole being disappointed with life, I guess. I try not to make my characters super angry or super, just super emo. I don't want to do that because I want to imagine characters that can have hope and can be happy, I want characters who can inspire people to do good. I don't want to make characters that inspire people to just wallow in their misery. And I understand with my past works, I can understand where you could get that opinion where, oh, it's okay if I just wallow in my misery. I was in a very dark time when I wrote some of my free verse poetry and some of my short stories. I was in a very dark time. And while I still love those stories, I don't love that someone could take those stories and be like, oh, it's okay for me to just wallow in my misery. No. I want to inspire others to be, at the very least, to rise up from their despair. Even if it's just their own despair, even if it inspires them to go for a walk every day. I want to write characters that inspire them to take a step into the right direction. If that makes any sense. As much as I appreciate characters like Elric, I don't want to write those characters myself. I don't think I do, at least. I don't know.
Not the older, complacent readers of Pulp Fiction who lionize their two-dimensional beefcake heroes. No, he wanted younger readers, typically male and educated ones, who felt like outcasts and were inspired by the beatniks, by the civil rights movement, and by the emerging counterculture. And
oh god, the acoustic guitars.
Who were eager to question authority and unsettle the establishment. He knew his audience well. Readers targeted by Charles Atlas ads in comic books. Ads that drew a stark contrast between so-called alpha males and beta males, and gave hope to the betas that they might someday triumph. Did those readers really want stories about a brawny, emotionally stunted bully who sees violence as the answer to most problems?
Yes.
Or might they prefer ones about a scrawny, studious, emotionally conflicted hero who chafes at authority and responsibility, explores arcane arts to solve problems, and often sees violence as a failure when he resorts to it? A hero more like themselves? That was a question on Moorcock's mind as he wrote the first Elric story.
I find with male readers, they appreciate both. Male readers typically don't like being told what to do in general. And something he didn't mention is Conan also was very anti-authoritarian in his own way. Like, for a good chunk of his youth, Conan was an adventurer. He was a thief. He stole. He flat out killed judges. He did not care about authority or civilization. He's like, this is how I live my life. I'm going to live it. And if you don't like how I live it, well, fuck you. I'm going to keep living it anyways. That's basically Conan's logic. Elric adds that complexity where he's like, yeah, this is the role I have to play in, but fuck you, I don't like it, and I'm going to buck at it at every chance I get. And I feel like both male readers can, well, I guess women can appreciate it too, but readers appreciate both. It's not an old versus new, like, oh, that old sorcery versus, oh, this shiny new sorcery. They appreciate both. It's both that they like. And we know this because people still adore Conan to this day, and people still adore Elric too to this day, but Elric is not nearly as adored as Conan, you know?
Stories at the start of the 1960s. Viewed through a Freudian lens, Moorcock saw Conan's character defined by the conflict between his id and his ego, as Conan channels the anger, greed, and lust of his id toward the vanquishing of his foes. With Elric, Moorcock took Freud a step further, positioning Elric's superego as the character's primary point of conflict as it questions the propriety of his id and ego. He's morally conflicted, and his role as a vanguard of chaos aimed at disrupting rules of law and order makes his superego's efforts to guide his decisions even harder. He also intentionally dabbles in Freudian imagery and double entendres. It's no coincidence that Elric is a proverbial 98-pound weakling with a powerfully seductive sword, one with a mind of its own
that wants to kill everyone that Elric loves. I don't know if Freudian logic is the best way to go about with Elric. Okay, I will say that the only Elric thing I read was the Stormbringer comic book series, and my impression of Elric there, I mean, yeah, he's a man whore. Yeah, he gets himself laid. Yeah, he is an average guy in and of himself. But I think that going purely by Freudianism when it comes with Elric is unfair. Okay. Let's get down to brass tacks. Freud was wrong about a lot when it comes to psychology. Freud was the link that channeled philosophy into psychology. Psychology at the time of Freud was not a thing. And someone needed to be the first person to make psychology a thing. And that first person was Freud. And a lot of his theories and scientific stuff was based on philosophy, not necessarily high research. Yes, he had his clients that he drew inspiration for his theories. However, he wasn't really working with super hard science. He was more philosophizing. Now, don't get me wrong, he was the start. And yes, he should be acknowledged as the start of psychology, and he got the ball rolling when it comes to researching psychology. But it must be made clear, he got a lot of stuff wrong. And I feel like if you view Elric of Melniboné just through the Freudian lens, you're missing out on a whole lot of other stuff with his character, because his character goes beyond the basic Freudian lens from what I have seen. Because he's not just an 89-pound weakling. He's not a nerd. He's a man who is struggling against his own fate. He knows he has a fate, but he doesn't like the fate he's been dealt with. He doesn't like the hand he's been dealt with, and he tries to fight against it however he can. And often fails. But that's not something you can really examine. Well, I guess you could examine it through a Freudian lens, but if you examine it exclusively through a Freudian lens, you're missing out a whole lot of other context with him.
Leaves our hero feeling, in turn, triumphant, satiated, and regretful whenever it's unsheathed and buried in its target.
It also steals the souls of the people he slaughters, so yippee! And it compels him to kill his closest allies. Yippee!
In that 1964 essay, Moorcock described the Elric story, The Stealer of Souls, as one of the most pornographic stories he had ever written, and that the whole Elric saga has, in its choice of situations and symbols, very heavy sexual undertones that were a cynical and a rather vulgar attempt to make the series popular.
Okay, I guess with that statement you could say, oh yeah, Freudian. Sure, why not? But cynical and rather vulgar. I'm just thinking about the story we read yesterday from Conan. Conan deadass boned a chick on a boat in front of all of her pirates. Like, she was the pirate queen, and she deadass boned her in front of everyone. So the whole sexual undertone thing, not new in fantasy, but okay.
Is it any wonder that Elric appealed to young male readers at the time? Rebels, outsiders, and lone wolf types idolized Elric, and by the 1970s, he might have been popular enough among certain types of readers to be considered the patron saint of disaffected youths. But Moorcock was trying to give young...
And I don't want to take that away from people who identify with Elric. I'm just saying, I don't know, it feels very weird to act like Elric is like brand spanking new about this, or to try to view him through this exclusively through the Freudian lens. Even though the author himself is like, oh yeah, I was definitely trying to be rebellious here. I don't know, it's very weird.
Young readers something more than just titillating entertainment. He hoped to help them make the transition to adulthood. In a 1963 essay about the psychological themes found in the Elric stories, Moorcock declared, "There is something retarded in the man who devotes himself wholly either to reading or to writing fairy stories for adults," which was a reference to the works of Tolkien, Howard, and their like. He felt that traditional sword and sorcery was easy to label as emotionally immature due to its appeal primarily to younger readers whose emotions are, understandably, not yet fully matured. With his Elric stories, he wanted to form a useful bridge between a childhood sense of wonder and an adult sense of surrealism, a bridge that seems to be infrequently crossed as people sit down halfway over and stay there the rest of their lives. Or, as he wrote in another essay decades later, very few adult central characters exist in pure sword and sorcery stories. They are either permanent adolescents, like Conan, actual children, or quasi-children. He wanted Elric to be different.
I mean, again, I'm sounding like a total Conan simp in this stream, aren't I? Conan is an adult. No, he does have adult sensibilities. He is very much an adult. Again, he's just an adult that comes from a barbarism tribe. He's a barbarian. He comes from a barbaric culture, and he's just navigating the world through the lens of his own barbaric culture, and he has to learn to live with other cultures. So that's not adolescence. It's just he's trying to live in the world that he was born into. What even is adolescence anyways? I hear adolescence being thrown around, and it's like, what does that even mean nowadays?
Contrary to popular misconceptions, Elric, the frail, moody, albino, not quite human sorcerer emperor of the island of Melniboné, agent of chaos, and wielder of a hungry, soul-drinking black sword, is not an anti-hero. But don't take my word for it.
Objection?
Take the word of his creator, who once wrote, "I never conceived Elric as an anti-hero. I prefer to think of him simply as a hero." A hero, but a deeply flawed and tragic one. As noted earlier, Elric was intended to be an anti-Conan rather than an anti-hero, substituting weakness, intellect, self-doubt, moral uncertainty, and romantic sensibilities for the muscle-bound power fantasies prevalent in the works of Robert E. Howard. According to Moorcock, his favorite heroes in his youth, such as Tarzan, Joe March, Ivanhoe, Philip Marlowe, and Finn McCool, all seemed people struggling for liberty and identity, forced to rely on their own wits and values, but ready, at some point, to make a serious, if reluctant, sacrifice in the common interest. They also were ready and willing to question the rules that prevailed in their respective stories. The status quo wasn't sufficient for them. Elric is cast in that mold. In the eternal conflict between law and chaos, he represents the creative and unpredictable side of chaos, opposing the rigid conformity, control, and stagnation of pure order. But his chaotic inclination is tempered with restraint, skepticism, and a conscience, leading him on occasion to support law-centered approaches in opposition to more extreme proponents of chaos.
Yeah, and that is the appeal to Elric, and I'm not taking that away. He is a very complex character. What I am not appreciating is the weird dunking on Conan the Barbarian. Why are we all of a sudden dunking on Conan? Look, there is a lot you could goof on with Conan, but the fact that the matter is, he did get the ball rolling on a lot of sword and sorcery, including with Elric. And do you just completely shit on Conan, considering that he paved the way for a lot of writers? It just seems very weird, especially considering that Conan did a lot of the stuff Elric did too. Like, I wouldn't exactly classify Conan as completely a hero. He does some very unheroic things. Like, first of all, in his youth, he's a thief. And then when he's a soldier, he just brutally cuts down people. Like, he just slashes people down. Even when they're doing nothing more than just lightly mocking him, he does that. He almost rapes the Frost Giant's daughter, which okay, this is going to sound super bad, but I'm not going to completely judge him on that because she was taunting him the whole way through and teasing him and getting him to follow her. And he was just completely fucking exhausted and frostbitten by that point. And he was just not in the right state of mind by the time he grabbed her. Not completely justifying it, I'm just saying. Okay, it's a weird situation. Read the story, The Frost Giant's Daughter, if you can, to completely understand what the hell is going on. But anyways, Conan's not a complete hero either. He has some serious flaws too. He's a very flawed character. So I guess I'm just frustrated by him acting like, oh, Elric is like a new age, blah, blah, blah. He's this anti-hero. He's not completely a hero. He's not completely like, pure. And it's like, yeah, and? Don't get me wrong, Elric is a cool character, but yeah, and? He's not the first of his kind. But, okay.
As an incarnation of the Eternal Champion, he strives toward cosmic balance from one side of the scale, and his path from self-indulgent chaos toward a more responsible.
Though I will say a lot of the art involving Elric is super cool. Like, look at these two images right here. This is some super cool art. I do appreciate the art when it comes to Elric of Melniboné. It's so sleek.
Responsible balance might provide a template of sorts, if not exactly a role model, for readers on their own road to self-discovery and maturity. Elric's a maelstrom of contradictions. He oscillates between high-minded pursuits and brooding defeatism, as his hopeful and sometimes naive idealism is suborned, twisted, and thwarted by the avaricious and deceitful designs of others. He wants to do the right thing, but he has difficulty recognizing what the right thing is. This sometimes leads him to abandon his canny intellect and his arcane abilities in favor of more bloodthirsty impulses, perhaps driven by the blood of dragons, his distant ancestors, that courses through his veins. He despises his own Melnibonéan people, who once ruled the entire world, but who've sunk into decadent irrelevance on their little island. They're like the elves of Rivendell, but with the depravity of Caligula. And yet, as their emperor, Elric craves their loyalty and adoration. He's both betrayed by and a betrayer of those close to him, which causes his moral compass to spin. He wonders if the act of destroying something can save it, and he symbolizes the ambivalence of mankind with its love-hates, its mean generosity, its confident bewilderment act. Elric is a thief who believes himself robbed, a lover who hates love. In short, he cannot be sure of the truth of anything, not even of his own emotions or ambitions. He's also...
And that's why I don't want to shit too much on Elric as a character, because I get how people can get something out of that from Elric. That is very relatable. A lot, not just men, but a lot of people can relate to Elric's struggles. They can relate to all of the junk he has to go through and his constant moral questionings throughout his stories. So that's why I don't want to shit on Elric too badly.
an addict, addicted to the drugs that counteract his sickly constitution, addicted,
Of course, and also drugs.
to the power and vitality his sentient, and possibly evil, sword provides him.
Oh, it is 100% evil. Don't even try me.
Addicted to the emotional thrill of vengeance and the violence it begets. Addicted to the desire for escape into the amoral, hedonistic lifestyle of the Melnibonéan culture into which he was born. And yet, he resents and fears those addictions and strives, inconsistently, to overcome them. Moorcock imagined Elric's terrible sword Stormbringer as a symbol of people's tendency to rely on mental and physical crutches and addictions rather than to cure their weaknesses at their source. That was a curious subtext at the dawn of the 1960s counterculture movement. Finally, Moorcock didn't want Elric to represent a heroic ideal that was little more than manipulative propaganda designed to make young women sacrifice their futures in unjust marriages, or young men to sacrifice their lives in unjust wars. Instead, he wanted an alienated hero.
I'm not denying that Moorcock said this from what I've seen, but the fact that there's a lot of brackets in that quote, I want to see the original quote myself.
Who, through his aloofness, could work out what is really going on and remain skeptical of authority, its pronouncement, and its motives. Elric seemed like a traditional kind of hero on the outside, with his royal birthright and his innate magical abilities, and the irony of his alienation was one of Moorcock's many conscious subversions of fantasy tropes that became a model for many later authors. For more than 60 years, Elric has been the entry point for many readers of Moorcock. To an extent, Elric is the linchpin to the multiverse and to the entire Eternal Champions saga. But his story isn't the best place to start, and that's according to the author. Instead, Moorcock recommends the Arakosi, John Dacre, and Von Beck stories as better introductions to it, which I discussed in my second video in this series. Reading Elric's stories can at times be confusing, frustrating, beautiful, cheesy, epic, magnificent, exhilarating, depressing, and incoherent. They weren't written in chronological order. The novels and shorter works jump around in the narrative's overall timeline.
You underestimate my power. I am come from the anime fandom. None of your incomprehensibility will ever stop me!
So publication order isn't the best way to go, in my opinion. Events and characters were altered in later editions to maintain continuity. Sometimes entire stories were combined, revised, and retitled in reprint editions, and new stories were added over time to fill in narrative gaps. As a result, newer editions, particularly omnibus ones, generally tell more consistent and complete versions of the stories. Owing to the length and convoluted nature of the series, and to my desire to avoid spoilers, I won't be discussing the plot of the stories in this video. You'll need to read the books, or watch other videos to learn more about Elric's encounters with demons, undead monarchs, and reptilian aliens.
Yeah, totally not shit that Conan had to deal with. Totally not shit Conan had to deal with. Whoop-de-doo. again, I'm not mad at Moorcock or at Elric, but I'm just mad at this whole, oh yeah, he was such a new character. He was doing all this cool new things. Like, he was more sexual. He's an anti-hero. He fought reptilian monsters and undead kings. That's like... Fucking Conan and Solomon Kane did that. Okay, with Solomon Kane, the whole sexual thing was not there, but... I'm just frustrated the whole, oh, I'm not like that old stuff. I'm not like that old rag over there. I am trying to subvert that. I am subverting that by having my hero fight an undead king. And it's like, for fuck's sake. It's okay to... Wait, well, I've heard that Michael Moorcock has also been, like, totally owning up to the fact that he steals from other sources too, including that one albino villain that was mentioned earlier. So Zenith, yeah, that's who it was. So again, I don't want to. Maybe I'm just mad at this one YouTuber who's trying to make the series seem way more revolutionary than it really is. Maybe I really am a Conan simp. Oh, fuck. Am I a Conan simp? Shit. Alright, anyway.
More about the wars he wages, the perilous journeys he undertakes, and the friends he makes and loses along the way in his somewhat accidental quest to save or damn the world and the multiverse. Initially, Elric's story was limited to 9 novelettes and novellas Moorcock wrote for the pulp magazine Science Fantasy between 1961 and 1964. The first of the novelettes, The Dreaming City, starts in the middle of Elric's saga, and the other 8 stories hop, skip, and jump forward all the way to the end of the saga, including his final fate. Those 9 short works were later published in 2 volumes, 1963's The Stealer of Souls and Other Stories, and 1965's Stormbringer. At the time of Stormbringer, Moorcock considered Elric's story to be finished, but a few years later he began adding to it, starting in 1967 with the novelette The Singing Citadel, which filled in more of the timeline between some of the...
Wait, that's what that word's pronounced? Citadel? Citadel. I keep pronouncing it Citadel.
earlier Elric stories. He continued the gap-filling with the 1971 novel The Sleeping Sorceress, and in 1972, a prequel novel, Elric of Melniboné, provided an origin story for Elric that sets the stage for the events in the previously published stories. Later additions to the story, including 1976's The Sailor on the Seas of Fate, 1989's The Fortress of the Pearl, 1991's The Revenge of the Rose, and 2022's The Citadel of Forgotten Myths, filled in more gaps while jumping around in the timeline, representing the 3rd, 2nd, 7th, and 5th books chronologically, depending on how one counts the volumes in the series. Muddling things as well was the decision by Daw Books to publish a 6-volume set of paperback editions in 1976 and 77 that gathered nearly all of the Elric stories written to that point. This was a welcome first attempt to present Elric's tale comprehensively in chronological order. Confusingly, though, for readers, 2 of the volumes, The Weird of the White Wolf and The Bane of the Black Sword, are fix-ups of some of the early Elric short fiction. The Sleeping Sorceress was renamed The Vanishing Tower, and the contents of the final book, Stormbringer, differ from the 1965 novel of the same name. A 7th volume, Elric at the End of Time, was published by Daw in 1984 as a collection of short fiction, but it isn't central to the main Elric storyline. The Daw editions have some of the best artwork ever produced for the series, painted by the great Michael Whelan. Between 2001 and 2005, Moorcock published 3 novels known as the Dream Quest Trilogy, or sometimes as the Una von Beck Trilogy, starting with The Dream Thief's Daughter, that feature a variant incarnation of Elric, who dreams himself into our world during World War II and the years following.
That sounds kind of stupid, not gonna lie. But I think that's enough of that video for now. I really need to start reading more Ulrich of Melniboné because he does sound like a very interesting character. Copying that link to post into the description, but I guess that's all I have for you guys today. I know this is a rather short stream, but I don't exactly have too much for this week. I think maybe next week I'll do an author deep dive. So let me know if you have any authors that you would like me to dive deeply into. But anyways, thank you all for listening, and I'll see you